said that. All right. Well, as Raymond is, Dr. Crowell is getting adjusted, and he definitely gets a bit of a pass. He was on the homeless count with us last week, and I know I, for one, am still not entirely recovered from that. But I wanted to start from that place. Last week, council members Rice, Glass, and I, the entire HHS committee, along with Councilmember Friedson and Dr. Crowell, had the opportunity to participate in the homeless count, which is, of course, something that occurs every year. It was my first time, and I know for Councilmember Rice, he has been multiple times, and this was Councilmember Glass the second time. And I happened to be assigned to the area up and down Crabs Branch, right by the facility. So, and it involved going into the woods, and it was an enlightening and powerful experience, to say the least. We were out until 3:30 in the morning, but it just provided, in many ways, the perfect backdrop for this discussion, underscoring the incredible, and I mean incredible, dedication of our service providers and our HHS staff who work tirelessly on behalf of these unbelievably vulnerable people. And so getting this right is so important, and also acknowledging the complexity of this specific issue can't be overstated. Obviously, everybody has the best of intention. We had a productive session before the holidays, and I know everybody is working overtime on this issue, and this is an opportunity for us to hear from the executive branch with regards to what the strategy is as of April 30th, which is right around the corner, but then also get any insight beyond April 30th, if we can, and just to get a sense of where we are with this project. We, of course, are joined by our colleagues and friends at MCCH, and as necessary, reserve the right to bring them up to the table to answer questions, and certainly give them an opportunity to express anything that has been missed, because it's important that their voices be heard, very much so within this discussion. So, and I also have to acknowledge that among the many reasons this is a complex issue, it involves multiple county agencies and lots of coordination. And I know, Dr. Crowell, as we learned in the last session, you are running point in terms of the general coordination of this effort. And so I will start with you, but if everybody could introduce themselves before Dr. Crowell begins his update, that would be helpful. Thank you.
David Dice, Director, Montgomery County Department of General Services.
Raymond Kroll, Director, Department of Health and Human Services.
Adam Ortiz, Director of Department of Environmental Protection. Good morning.
Caroline Sturgis, Assistant Chief Administrative Officer.
Great. So, Dr. Crowell, the floor is yours. And obviously, Linda, as things come up, please, don't be bashful, as you never are. Thank you.
Thank you, and good morning. Good to be back with you all again. And thanks to this trio, along with Councilmember Friedson, for joining us at the point in time. It was a good night, and we got some things done and helped some people along the way. I was very grateful for your company and for your support. This is a pickup from where we left off back a few months ago, and we have been doing a fair amount of work, both with our partners at MCCH and across the various departments to come up with strategies for addressing the issues at Goody Drive and the men's shelter. The NIOSH report made it clear that the health vibrations produced by the flares do not pose a health hazard. But after listening to the concerns of many folks, including the staff and the residents at the shelter, we recognize that the ongoing levels of trauma and anxiety make it prudent not to return to Goody Drive in the near future. So that's left us with developing some alternatives. At this point, our plan at the end of winter overflow of a hypothermia season is to return to the Crabs Branch shelter. But as we return to it, we recognize that we'll need to make some upgrades to make sure that it is more comfortable and more usable for our residents. I'll ask DGS to talk about the strategy, but what we plan on doing in terms of facilities and changes to the space in a bit. But essentially, the upgrades to Crabs Branch will allow us to continue to use the space for an extended period of time until we come up with a more permanent solution for men's shelter. We'll use Crabs Branch as Crabs Branch will remain as the primary location for the men's shelter through the summer and at least through the start of the next hyperthermia season, depending on how quickly we can get an alternative in place. Recognize that we may not be able to serve as many residents as necessary at Crabs Branch, so we will also maintain some capacity for sheltering men at Progress Place down in Silver Spring. Longer term, we're considering a number of options. One is the renovation of alternative county-owned space as a permanent location for the men's shelter on a county-owned building. The other one is the use of county land to erect a purpose-built shelter using sprung technology, and Director Dice will talk about that in a bit. And the third one, of course, is to stay open to the possibility that we might purchase or lease commercial property at some point for a space. So we're open to a number of opportunities, but we're looking for the ones that will give us the most effective, be the most efficient use of time and resources available for the county. We discussed these broad details with MCCH last week, and both the management and members of the board, and requested their cooperation in developing a program of requirements for Crabs Branch. And we'll continue to consult with them, as we did with 6th Taft Court, to make sure that Crabs Branch, the upgrades that we're planning at Crabs Branch, will meet the needs of the residents at Crabs Branch. And we'll also continue to work with them, with MCCH, on making sure that Taft Court is operational until the end of hyperthermia season. We've also, following our initial meeting with staff and the residents, and seeing the levels of trauma that still exists around this issue, we've offered the Health and Human Services Trauma Response Team and made them available to go out to meet with the staff and to work through some of those issues with the staff. They're highly trained and skilled set of folks, and they do this all over the county. It seems totally appropriate that we offer that service to the staff and the residents. And we're waiting now for a final date on when we can do that, and we can go in and start some of that work. So that's my 10,000-foot level view, and I'll turn it over to Director Dice to talk a little bit about the sheltering plan and the facilities that we're considering.
Okay, thank you. Again, David Dice, Director, Montgomery County General Services. We've been looking at a number of options. Again, we have very narrow timeframes and windows, and what enables us to come up with not just a temporary, but a long-term workable solution in a very narrow amount of time. So we've got two fronts. One is, as Dr. Kraut pointed out, what to do when we have to be out of 6th Taft Court by the end of April. And in talking with HHS staff, our target's actually earlier than that. April's when we have to be out under our agreement with the City of Rockville. Clearly, we have to be out of that and moving the population before then. The other front, of course, is that all of it, or what else do we need to do, as Dr. Kraut pointed out. What we have come upon is a type of structure that is being used extensively in the West Coast, Northwest, up in northern climes such as Toronto and others. It's a company called Sprung, and we can come in with a very durable type of structure, well insulated and well equipped. I'm going to provide copies of things for you so you don't have to take a lot of notes. We have met with representatives, and the current strategy is to place a structure on the parking lot in front of the Crabs Branch facility. It'll be about 4,500 square feet, which is larger than the structures that are there now, so we'll more than double the space. It will still maintain handicap accessibility. We won't have to do restroom facilities and showers outside. Everything will be inside. And last year, if you recall, when we were setting up the structures at Crabs Branch, it was quite literally emergency triaging. This is not that. These structures are very sound and very durable, lasting 20 years or more, and very affordable, easily and quickly erected. I have targeted, in meeting with the representatives from Sprung and with my staff, and everyone knows that mid-April is our deadline. So come hell or high water, we're going to be there. We're also looking at other locations owned by the county that I don't want to divulge at this time. We're happy to brief committee members in private on that, but since it's dealing with different real estate transactions, keep that quiet for the moment. We'll have more information within the next couple weeks that we can be public with. But looking at long-term strategies in excess of 10,000 square feet, which is more than the service provider has had available to them up to this date. So we think that we've got both a handle on the short-term and long-term solutions. Just to provide council members with an example of what we're talking about, this is a first draft plan for the facility that would be placed at the Krabs Branch location. This is some pictures of typical interior spaces provided by the manufacturer. They have been in business doing this work for over a century, actually, in various forms and formats. Here, for instance, is an example of the Toronto 24-hour respite center that you could use as an idea of the type of structure that we would be putting at Krabs Branch, including the exterior vestibule, which provides a weather barrier entering the site. This is all, again, very affordable, easily connected to the existing structure, and can be erected in as little as a few weeks. So we are preliminarily working on, we plan to bring an additional electric feed to the Krabs Branch site. We will work with our permitting services department on all of the necessary permits. The nice thing about this sort of structure, too, is it doesn't require major foundational work, which saves an awful lot of time. And as you can see from particularly from the Toronto plan, which is similar to the type of thing that we would do, well lit, well ventilated, clear headspace, very light, and can be organized in any way that is necessary. We have requested and received a preliminary program of requirements from HHS. So with that in hand, we're planning the direction of interior layout. Key component right now, of course, is getting the structure final design and permitted. If we can do all of that in a record fashion, then I think I'm very comfortable with meeting our April deadline. Long-term solution is probably, based on where we're currently headed, probably about a 10 or 12-month solution, which is why Dr. Crowell pointed out that we may be looking at this into the first half of the next hypothermia season. But again, I point out that this doubles the capacity of Krabs Branch and can easily accommodate the 100 or more individuals that are currently being cared for at 6 Taft Court. So we think we've got a strategy that will certainly help us branch over into the next hypothermia season. And we're not regarding this structure at Krabs Branch as temporary. Once it's there, it can be there for a good long time, and will help address the challenges faced by the HHS and the homeless community well into the future. I say all of that bearing in mind County Executive Elrich's commitment to end homelessness. We certainly don't want to be reliant on these and feel like we've done our job. We ultimately want to make help this population back onto their feet and into the communities. But until then, we will have the capability of servicing those that are in need, working with our partners at MCCH and trying to address these issues. Just again, one last technical element. You see this and you're apt to think it's just a big tent. These are actually, the roof structures are actually about 14 inches thick, have an R25 insulating rate, and are, as you can see, it's one of the particular reasons I gave you the Toronto. If Toronto can do it, I think we probably can too. We have other sites, Fresno, San Francisco, Oregon, Seattle. These are being used all over the United States and Canada, and very effectively. I'm just going to, that's addressing the structure. The committee in the packet had some other issues. If you want me to go ahead and talk about those, I can. One of the questions was about the monitoring program at Goody. We do have monitors, air quality, vibration, and sound monitors set in place. They've been in place for a few weeks now. We're going to be getting reports, and we'll issue reports on a monthly basis. First report should be mid-February, a couple weeks from now. We just had them put in about 2.5, 3 weeks ago. So we will be tracking all of that. We visited the site last week, and certainly when the flares are operating, as they do most of the time, when you're out in the parking lot, you can feel just the air vibration, because obviously the flares are operating and there are waves of air. Inside the building, you don't sense it. You can feel it on the walls, on the windows. We have a way to address that for any future occupant of those structures that will address all of the vibration issues, but the vibration is not discerned readily on the inside of the buildings. But you can certainly feel the waves outside. Again, the commitment has been made to look for an alternate solution for the homeless shelter, but we also have structures that are perfectly suitable for other uses, and that's what we're investigating right now. We'll, again, be continuing that monitoring into the future. No reason to stop, to make sure we get consistent readings. But I do congratulate DEP. The work that they did in upgrading and improving the flares has definitely had an impact. So we'll provide the results to the committee as they come in.
Great. Adam, do you have any updates or anything that you wanted to add for now?
I could just briefly say that we've completed the repairs on the flares, as Director Dice has said. It's provided a steadier burn of the flares, but as everybody knows, it's essentially an industrial facility, managing the gas from the methane, so it remains an industrial facility with the air vibrations that Mr. Dice said. But we've been pleased with the progress, and then there's going to be an ongoing remediation that begins next year, but I can brief the committee on that another time if it's interested.
Great, thank you. Ms. Sturgis, did you want to add anything from the county executive's perspective on this? I know obviously Dr. Crowell and everybody speaks for the county executive, but was there anything else you wanted to add before we go into questions?
No, just to reiterate what has already been stated earlier, that, the county executive, Elrich's commitment is to end homelessness. So the option that we have put before as a proposal is a temporary option, looking at how we can look at utilizing county resources to end homelessness. So, thank you.
Great. I have a lot of questions with regards to the structure, but just it sounds like the headline here is that there isn't any imminent plan to go back to Goody Drive.
Correct.
Okay. Which is good to hear, frankly. So, with regards to the structure itself, and I'm familiar with these structures from my old days at the Recreation Department, because these are often used for recreational uses quite effectively, actually. And you can actually put pools in these things. And so I'm familiar with their strong structures. They stand up to a number of different elements. There are also many different options with regards to ownership. It could be lease to own, it could be outright purchase, it could even be rental. What are we looking at in terms of cost, and what structure may make the most sense for us for this particular location?
Again, I think because of the long-term need, again, this is not necessarily a short-term need. We don't know, to be honest, exactly how long that need would be, which would make a lease or rental difficult to negotiate at this point. To be quite honest, these are not, in relative terms, expensive structures. They are not, I don't want to convey them as being portable. Obviously, anything that's put up can be taken down, just a matter of degree of difficulty. So yes, it could be taken down and reused elsewhere. Obviously, each site that it could be used is unique to itself, and so the dimensions would be different. So it's not as if what we put at the Crabs Branch we could pick up and put someplace else unless the site conditions allowed for that. A short-term answer is looking at a purchase. The purchase price, I don't I can't quote to you right now. I don't have that. I just got these drawings. We're just working this up now. And in the purchase of the structure, there's still additional site work that's involved. So give us a week or two, and then we'll come up with some definitive costs. All I can say is, again, within the range of the effort that's gone into this project so far, this will, in those relative terms, not be a lot of money. And so that's one of the things that's particularly attractive about structures such as this. So if you can give me a couple weeks, I can come back with a better estimate of site improvements, additional work that needs to be done. We do have to break out some curb and gutter, move a couple of other items. So once I have all of those costs, we can funnel them to Linda and get them to the committee.
And you've identified a site on the site of where you think this would be.
Absolutely, yeah. This, if you've been to the Crafts Branch site, so you've got a parking lot in front of the. We're just going to put this on that parking lot. The staff will be able to park along the road. Crafts Branch Way, as you know, in that area is virtually no traffic. The only traffic on that is our vehicles coming in and out of the Highway Maintenance Depot and the State's Highway Depot, which is immediately across the street. So we don't see any traffic hazards represented there. There will be enough space on the site for handicap van accessible access to the site, and we've looked at all of this with accessibility certainly as a key priority.
So obviously the operation, there's the construction element to this, but even more importantly is the operations and how because you have some flexibility in terms of layout of administrative space versus program space versus kitchen. I would hope that there's consultation currently with the provider and obviously HHS as well on, I know we're preliminary here, we just have identified a potential long-term solution, which I think makes a lot of sense, but the coordination with our provider community and MCCH in particular on how the layout and the design of this facility will work. What does that communication look like? How will that work?
Well, we started with a program of requirements that we asked MCCH to send us, so that's the first point as a basis for starting. As we go through this, we'll do what we did with Taft Court, and that is we will have to have some meetings around the process of developing and fleshing this out and making sure we've got all the details addressed. I'm aware from the experience of 6 Taft that there's the physical structure itself and getting that laid out, but there's also the 10,000 details of actually getting the building prepped and in a state where it can be occupied come the end of winter overflow. And that'll require the same kind of communication we've had or something similar in working on 6 Taft.
Okay. And then in terms of the coordination with various utilities, do you anticipate any challenges?
No, we already, there's some work that we can do in advance of structure and even the permit for that structure. We can go in and run site utilities. We can do some of the foundation work. That's why it was important, and again, thanks to the contractor, the vendor, to rush these plans, put them together so that we have something to operate off of. Now that we just received these, and we just received them, we can work with MCCH and the staff from DGS Facilities and MCCH have been working very closely on how we can do layouts, if we need to expand the shower facilities, warming kitchen, meeting space. We'll continue to work on that over the next couple of weeks because we only have a couple of weeks before we have to have some definitive action in place, but we'll do that. And again, a lot of the furniture and equipment that's at 6 Taft will then be moved back here. So it's not that we have to go and procure some additional items. There'll be some logistics, but I think the facilities folks have proven that they're up to the logistical challenge, and Susie and the folks from MCCH I think would agree that they've gotten a lot of support. So as Dr. Crow pointed out, we're just going to keep open communications. Here's what we've got. Let's make this work. Again, the good news is that we've got the spring and summer and early fall season to work out some of the kinks while we're planning and implementing a longer-term year-round solution. That year-round solution, again, is probably going to be in the 15,000 square foot region, for which we have also received the program of requirements from HHS in conjunction with the service provider. So I think we've got both a short-term and long-term strategy that's eminently doable.
That sounds good. We had mentioned the importance of volunteers to the overall operation. And so as we take into account things like parking spaces and general logistics, it's obviously beyond just the clients and MCCH staff, but ensuring that there's enough capacity and infrastructure
Yes.
for those groups as well.
Yes, agreed.
Defer to my colleagues for other questions for now. Councilmember Rice.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I just want to first start off by saying thank you. I was actually at the site yesterday. I was on Goody Drive. I had to go do some stuff with my wife, and happened to go by there, so I actually pulled in and experienced the same thing again, which I completely understand from the perspective of that there's been a change in terms of lessening of the impact, but it's kind of along the lines of the PTSD, to where once you've been in it and you've had the higher level, even a smaller level, if you still feel it, you still think about the fact that it was the larger level before that made you sick, and that's still in your mind. And so I really want to applaud you understanding that and appreciating that. I also had the opportunity to talk to a staff member from MCCH, not one who we normally talk to in these realms, line level employee who was just telling me about her experience yesterday at the women's conference, and got a great understanding of, I'd never talked to someone else beyond leadership about their impact, and got a great understanding of what she felt and experienced. And so I really just want to say thank you, because I think that this is the best resolution for us to understand. It just wouldn't work for us, and trying to put people back in that situation wasn't a good thing for us to do. And so I really appreciate us moving forward. I would just say, and part of the other thing, and I don't want to steal Councilmember Glass's thunder, because I'm sure he's going to talk about this too, but we also have to understand that our clientele is very, they're creatures of habit. Part of that is part of the mental illness, and they like to have patterns and consistency, and by us continuing to move causes disruption. When we encounter folks in the streets, they have patterns. They have places that they go, and they're set every single day. This is what they do, and this is what happens. And understanding, as Dr. Kroll, who's nodding his head, knows all too well, for knowing and having family members who suffer from mental illness, having stability, having consistency matters a lot. And so by us continuing to shift is causing significant disruption in terms of the clientele that we serve. And so we have to understand that in terms of trying to minimize that as much as possible. And so while we're doing the best thing by continuing to move and do all the things we want, also understand that this does have a significant impact on the people themselves. And we do have to understand it and try and minimize that as much as possible. So I just put that out there because we haven't talked about that a lot, but it's really important. Just experiencing the things that we experienced and saw when we were out there, it is one in which folks have their routines. And when you interrupt their routines, it makes a significant difference. And so from that perspective, even though we find ourselves with a very good option, I think, that I completely support, I also think that we may have to have some additional resources that are there to really kind of get folks comfortable with this new entity structure transition that we have. It's not just going to be like, yeah, so we're now over here, or we're now in this building, we're now in this new structure, go in there, it's fine. Because folks who aren't thinking the same way and aren't processing the same way that our minds are, that think that this is something great and new and terrific and safe, are going to be very cautious and very like, what is that? And I don't know if I want to be in that. And so even though we think that it's a great structure, it has more impact than that. And so I just want us to be mindful of that. I know you are, but I just want to say it because it's incredibly important. And then last but not least, I do have an idea. So I want to put it out there. Yeah, exactly. My ideas are always expensive. We've been talking about families. We've been talking about trying to serve families, and we've been talking about the challenges, and Linda's worked with me, and thank you, Linda. And, HHS as a whole, Uma, your predecessor, has worked with me on this a lot in terms of what to do with families if we eventually do then have a permanent site transitioning out of this. Instead of continuing to place families in and trying to put them in hotels across the area, having a facility that's specifically geared, even a place that has play area for children, all those kinds of things, a kind of daycare within it, something along those lines would be incredible. And so as we think about what we can do with this level of permanency in terms of addressing another piece of homelessness that we've been talking about for a very long time, as we've transitioned through veterans and then chronic, and then some of our youth, and then families, it really is important for us to think about utilizing some of these things. And so I just think that's a great option for us to think about in the context of what it is that we're trying to do to address the county executive's goal to end homelessness, and our goal and our community's goal to end homelessness here in Montgomery County. So just wanted to put that out there.
Thank you. Just a quick response is that I think obviously we treat these things as two separate kinds of distinct issues. One of them being addressing the men's shelters and the individuals who are facing chronic homelessness for a lot of different reasons that I won't get into in the moment. But to say that as part of the Interagency Commission on Homelessness strategic plan, and which is part of the exec's plan to end homelessness, there is an intent to focus our attention increasingly on families, on ending family homelessness. So support that and endorse that, and think we're looking at a variety of strategies. Shelter is just the place to get them off the streets for that short-term period of time until we can find them a more permanent shelter arrangement, housing arrangement.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. Taking a step back, as the chair mentioned last week, many of us were walking around till late in the morning for the point in time count. And I want to share with you a story that included myself, Councilmember Rice, Dr. Kroll, and other staff, including my Chief of Staff, Valeria Carranza, who was walking around with us, because we were walking around the downtown Rockville area till about 3:30 in the morning. And around 2:45, 3 o'clock, we saw a gentleman at the Metro sitting on the stairs. And at first he was apprehensive to speak with us, but we saw that he was older and that he was visibly shaking because it was cold outside. And Valeria was able to communicate him in Portuguese, and we learned that he was homeless, and he had two small brown bags with him, one full of documents and the other full of whatever other minor things he was able to carry with him. And through that 20-minute interaction, it ended with us calling a lift, putting him inside, and sending him to the men's shelter in Taft Court. And that underscores how important this conversation is and how important it is for us to get this right, to make sure that that 81-year-old man had a place to go. And come next winter, come this summer, whenever someone is in need, we have a place for them to go. And so I appreciate this, the update. Sprung looks like a very promising solution. I agree with the assessment that I've seen many sports facilities, small sports facilities, and so I know the nature of these structures, and am encouraged by the information that you're sharing, the durability and the flexibility with that space. Let me just drill down a little bit more about that specific location. Having been in that parking lot, I know the size of that. There is that building where MCCH had used last winter. What is the plan for that space? Would that become administrative, or would that become a connector with the Sprung facility?
The structures that are currently on the site,
Yeah.
we're going to continue. We're not moving those. We don't really have the time to do anything. I mean, if I had more time, I'd probably take those down and just put a really large sprung structure on that site, but we don't have that kind of time or resources. So we'll continue to use that. There'll be a vestibule connecting this structure to that, so there's a pass-through, and so that the object, of course, is that we don't even have to go outside. Everything is seamless and inside. There is an accessible ramp to the existing structures, and we'll have to work with the service provider on layouts. As again, I said, we just got this. Now that we have these plans and dimensions, we'll work with Susie and HHS to do a layout of what goes where. We're looking at the potential for, in the existing structures, expanding the shower facilities to what extent they're needed, or the warming kitchen. A great credit to the the charity and generosity of our community. I know that MCCH receives, is it over 100,000 meals donated to them? So a warming kitchen and food delivery process is important, even during the summer when the hypothermia aspect is shut down, and that's what really 6 Taft Court is, but there's still a need for a larger operation even during the summer. We saw that last year with the tents that we set up. This is going to be far better than that. So yeah, we're actually looking at doing this as if the now conjoined facilities connected through a vestibule will be ongoing. That existing structure, however good it has functioned, it definitely lasts, but it doesn't last indefinitely. So if we ever had to do something with those buildings, we'd probably just take them down and expand the sprung structure.
Thank you for that. At our last hearing on December 9th, we talked about, or you talked about, the cost that has been involved to get us where we are now, the piecemealing approach to making sure that we could continue doing this work, that MCCH can continue doing this work. And you said that there is no price tag on this facility just yet because this information is new. Do you anticipate being able to cover those costs within the current budget, or do you expect maybe an emergency supplemental to cover those costs?
We think there will be an emergency supplemental request. We're holding off because we're already looking at a supplemental for the work that's been done to date. We're thinking that we will wait a little longer and get a sense of what the cost would look like before we actually submit one. But,
thank you on that. 2 other quick questions. One, Councilmember Rice talked about the county's continued desire to end homelessness, and we're all committed to that. But I was particularly intrigued by statements I've heard the county executive make recently and things I've read about providing more support to get people off the streets, to get them into permanent housing. And so more broadly, if we take a step back from this particular site and this particular need, it seems to me that a short-term fix such as this is part of a broader vision of eradicating and ending homelessness by not needing to build a more permanent facility. If that is correct, can you expand upon that thinking a little bit more? I don't know, whoever wants to answer.
Sure, that is correct. In our last briefing with the county executive, when we explored all of the various options, he reminded us that, his vision and how he would like to see resources being spent on looking at how can we eliminate homelessness and looking at providing opportunities for permanent housing. So that was a directive that he made to all of the directors, the county directors and myself. So that is our main objectives. And so that is one of the reasons why we are looking at a temporary solution right now that will allow us to look how we can better expend county resources on looking at a more permanent solution of providing permanent housing.
I appreciate that, as a member of the ICH, currently working on some legislation to expand opportunities to go more into family, support families, mostly women with children, and I'll be sharing that with my colleagues shortly. But there's a fine balance between wanting to end homelessness and not invest in the long-term needs that would require, but providing the immediate needs that we have. And we don't want to shortcut today's needs in the hopes that we won't have those needs in the future. And so as you continue doing that work and looking at future budgets, please be mindful of that balancing act.
I think that Mr. Ulrich's goal, vision for ending homelessness, and the one that we share with ICH requires that we do something on the front end to maintain capacity to house people who become homeless for whatever reason, because there will always be folks who will have that happen to that will happen to them, whether it's individuals or families. But that the longer term goal is to identify, create opportunities for more affordable housing, and a variety of different housing solutions for folks so that they can live comfortably in a permanent space for themselves and their families. So that, I think, is part of the larger plan, is not just to think about this front door or just the back door. We don't want to defer one for the other. We've got to do both at the same time. And so.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you both. Those are great questions and points. Just a couple of other issues. One, laundry. It was an important component of Goody for a variety of reasons, and so as we look at making accommodations specific to operations, I think that's a point we shouldn't overlook, and something we should focus on. The other thing, and because while we're talking about this as temporary, I think this is a very positive solution for a variety of reasons, knowing these structures, and while they are, yes, temporary, there's a permanency to them because they are strong structures. They hold up to elements. And so as we look at the FFI, the furnitures, fixtures, and equipment, as you come up with your emergency supplemental request, I can only speak for myself, but this staff and this team has been through hell. All of us have, through this entire process. So to the degree to which we can make this space accommodating on a number of different levels, I think would be important. And this is also an opportunity for us to look at existing furnitures, fixtures, and equipment and those things that need to be replaced. I think this is an opportunity to start fresh, to move forward, and I like the continuity of the overall operation within one campus, which I think will lead to some other positive things. So I think it's really good. The other thing is communication with our community, which is obviously complex, and Councilmember Rice is absolutely right with regards to the routines. It's going to take case managers some time to make their clients feel comfortable and sort of understand that this is a safe place, this is an engaging place, and so that, with, again, going back to operations, I think that's going to be important as part of the overall plan. And I know that, Dr. Crowell, that this is something your staff is really intent on and has been magnificent about, but I just wanted to sort of underscore that point, which I think will be important as we transition through. And a couple of other random things, since we're in a point of public record here. There were some transportation issues that were identified with regards to ride-on, specifically to Krabs Branch. So we will be following up with, and there's nobody from DOT here, so you guys are off the hook on that one. That's right. That's right. But we will be sending, not a formal, but just as a follow-up in some of the things we learned that night. There are some subtle adjustments that could be made that would help both our case managers, but certainly the clients themselves in a variety of ways. And I know my colleagues probably had other observations as well, things that I think are well within our realm to adjust and fix. Councilmember Rice.
Just very briefly on the point that you were talking about earlier. So, Dr. Kroll, I would like, as we're talking about supplementals, and because we all understand that there will be additional work that needs to be had, especially when it comes to outreach as well as case management, we need to consider that as a part of overall what we do, because again, folks who are used to going to one facility who are now, this is the third of the facilities in terms of what's going on and movement of folks, it's going to be important to just communicate that to folks. I know that the majority of folks are assimilating and are going, and that's fine, but I'm concerned about all we need is one that falls through the cracks, and it's something that was there and was stable before for a very long time, historical, and so from that perspective, even folks who come from other areas who aren't familiar and who've been here in the past and who know that's the place to go. So just like we had the signage that we requested that be up, and it was up, so I saw it. But those are the kinds of things where, again, it's not just about a sign telling somebody where to go, but it's about making them feel comfortable and all of that, as you know, with outreach. So if we could incorporate that, that would be helpful.
Sure, I think that absolutely there's a need to let the community know, especially the community of homeless individuals who might want to take advantage of it. Of our plans. Krabs Branch has the advantage of being a familiar space to folks who've had any kind of history of being homeless, and so that'll be something we'll get a plus out of that. I do think that the folks who are in shelter, for the most part, at Taft Court now, should not be the folks that were at Goody Drive when we left Goody Drive. There should be this transition of as we work to help folks find space and get them back on their feet. I think that that's not always the case, but it is the goal, and our long-term goal is to make homelessness brief so that we get down to a 30-day window for folks before and finding them some place to live. So that by the time we move back to Crabs Branch, we'll move back to Crabs Branch, and eventually the folks that are there will have turned over, and there'll be a different group of folks, hopefully fewer of them as we go forward. But always there's a need to do communication and let folks know as clearly as we can about the transition and the change. We have outreach teams in the streets continuously who are engaging folks who are on the streets, so they will be notified, will be aware, will make folks aware of what the changes are, and we will announce them as broadly as we can to our provider community, well, to our provider community and to other providers across the county. So.
Okay. I think that's it for now. I appreciate everybody and everybody's ongoing efforts. And Ms. McMillan, was there anything else?
No, I think the committee's actually coming back on February 10th to talk about the interagency commission plan. And so we can just kind of keep apprised then and have a chance to, people will have a chance to have considered the program of requirements and some more information.
We'll use that
So
as a
we'll
target date. Sure. Okay.
We'll just continue.
Yeah, and I just want to underscore that Councilmember Glass's point and Councilmember Rice's as well about the connection. I can't appreciate Councilmember Glass's approach to this enough. He's been a tremendous leader on so many different levels, and it will be part of a broader discussion that we have moving forward. This was obviously just to discuss about this specific issue. Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Yes. Yes, of course.
Yeah.
Hello, everybody. I want to. Oh, thank you. I'm not used to speaking at this table. I want to share everybody's. I'm Susie Sinclair Smith. I'm the Chief Executive Officer of the Montgomery County Coalition for the Homeless, and I'm joined by Jen Schiller, who's our Chief Programs Officer, who oversees all of our programs. I do want to join in expressing deep thanks to every person who's sitting around this table, as well as around the room, in the Herculean efforts that have been taken since last February and then May, when we had to consecutively evacuate both our administrative and our shelter. We have moved 3 times, or this will be the 3rd time that we've moved the shelter since last May, and it has been a stressful time for us, and we are been very grateful for the efforts and the ongoing communication to address the needs of our clients, but also address the needs of our staff and our organization, because it has had an overall stress. I wanted to go back to, and it was interesting for me, and I'll make this quick, a year before the evacuation happened, the Department of Health and Human Services did a community review of our Home Builders Care Assessment Center, and the program received glowing remarks, not only for the outcomes that we were achieving, because we had instituted a whole new programming of 30, 60, 90-day move-out plans, and we had cut our length of time for men in the shelter in half. Also, we were recognized as providing best practices at the shelter that made our services so successful, one of which is being very low barrier and housing first in our approach to letting men come in no matter what issues they're facing, making sure we have a safe and supportive and trauma-informed environment for them to engage in services. And there was an important component was that we have a team approach at the shelter. We have case managers, we have a housing locator, we have an employment specialist, we have a diversion specialist who meets with people to help them to hopefully divert from the experience of homelessness. And in the report, there was an acknowledgement that this is a best practice by the Department of Health and Human Services. And I'm actually on a committee of the Interagency Commission on Homelessness, where we're focusing on creating a one-stop shop for services for clients to help them resolve their homelessness quickly. So I really encourage the awareness of not only creating as many beds as possible, but also the awareness of creating the space so that these essential services can be co-located. It has been difficult. There have been men who are staying way too long at the shelter now because of this recent situation. We lost our middle management at the shelter. We brought on new staff. We continue to be heartfelt, passionate, committed to outcomes for our clients and the delivery of our services, but it's been challenging. So we really look forward to this new location, but just want to emphasize the importance of not only the dignified bathrooms and laundry facilities, but also the co-location of essential services. We also have it's 1,000 volunteers, and thank you for recognizing that, who come and help us at the shelter. So we would love to keep, I will just put this out there, that I am very worried about the lack of specificity about what's going to happen come hypothermia season, that we have been providing the emergency shelter program for 30 years. Our staff know clients have grew up with them, many of them. We have a really phenomenal system of care and awareness of who people are, men who are experiencing homelessness. So we are concerned about the hypothermia services being split while we know it's necessary. And not having that overall vision. We welcome partnerships by other Interfaith Works at Progress Place and Cornerstone and our other nonprofit agencies, so we are eager to partner with them, but I think that is just a concern for us because Crabs Branch had been used as the overflow location for hypothermia. I do want to, because I know I know nobody expected this, and I'm sure it's almost a year, and I look around the table, and, it's been a slog of a year, and I think we've all dealt with it the best we can, and I think we've learned lessons as we've moved forward. It would be helpful. Raymond has been awesome in holding 8:30 Tuesday morning calls every week to make sure that we're keeping, progress on track, that issues are being addressed. It would be very helpful to have an initial planning meeting to talk about the space and talk about what it looks like, and because we, having worked with this population in a congregate facility for 30 years, know specifics about the successful design of space. And I just, again, want to thank you. We are eager to be partners. I think when you go through hard times together, you get to know each other in all sorts of different ways, and we all have our own interests that we come to the table with, and I think that's part of what makes this a complex issue, is that we're juggling so many different interests. But our leadership, I want to applaud Amanda Harris for really keeping a dedicated eye on making sure we have systems and programs that end homelessness in Montgomery County, and I think we all agree that if any place can end homelessness, it is Montgomery County. We have, it's interesting to see the important role of a facility in that whole process. And I do, and Jen, if I could, I think Jen and I have worked together for quite some time. We kind of complete each other's sentences, but if you could talk about the important role of the emergency shelter as part of the crisis response system in getting people into permanent housing, that would be awesome. And I didn't tell you I was going to ask you that question, so I apologize.
Sure. I'll be very, very brief because I know I'm at the end. I was at the end last time, too. Jen Schiller, Chief Programs Officer at Montgomery County Coalition for the Homeless. So I was really glad to hear that there will be another permanent structure at the shelter. I can't tell you how many men I've encountered that have asked me and have been really worried about where are we going to go next, where we know we can't stay here. We know the city of Rockville, this is their building, right? So people know that, and people are nervous and anxious. And then I was at a meeting. Cornerstone Montgomery provides our psychiatric services at the shelter, and I was meeting with their therapists, and they said, that we and their CFO, because we're running out of money for our psychiatric services, and they're like, well, we needed to, we had to use a lot of the money because people were kind of really in need of our services, because people were very anxious. I talked to one of the therapists that said it took me 2 months to get everybody to calm down, and now you're telling me that you guys are going to move again. And they're really anxious about the fact that now we have to move again. And then I said, but wait, in about 10 to 12 months, then we're going to move again. And so to be really, it struck me when I was in the shelter talking to the men that they really, that we at MCCH and HHS, that we really need to communicate very clearly with them. Because they're the ones that are running around outside looking for where the shelter is going to be again. And so as clear as we can be, and I know Amanda and Alana are going to, get me that information, but I think we're going to actually advertise it in the shelter, right? You're right. We're going to be here until April 1st, and then we're going to move to, and it's just going to be on the wall and in multiple languages for everybody to read. Because I do think that anxiety that people feel, when they're experiencing a housing crisis, you need a permanent structure. You need an MCCH to be there for 30 years. Because when the stuff hits the fan, that's where you go. You go to that space. And be it, it doesn't have to be humongous, because hopefully we're ending homelessness, but it is going to be slick. It is going to work for everybody. People are going to come in. A case manager is going to have a confidential space to meet people. The therapist is going to have a confidential space to meet people. Your medication is going to be locked up and doesn't have to be guarded by somebody because we don't have a room and it's, in a plastic Tupperware behind the thing, right? Like, we shouldn't have to pay somebody to sit there, but it's going to be locked behind a door where nobody can get your psych meds but you. Or nobody can get your methadone but you, right? So these are all really important things, and for us just to communicate. And I appreciate it. Thank you for the story about the guy who had to have the lift to Crabs Branch or to Taft Court or wherever. It's really important that we have a permanent location. So I'm really looking forward to. It's great. We're going to have a spring structure. That's awesome. But whatever our permanent address is going to be is going to take the anxiety from here and just quash it. Because we're going to be able to tell people this is where we are. We're not leaving. Go to your permanent apartment, and if you ever have a problem again, we're going to be right here. But a lot of that, people not wanting to move out, people are really nervous and really scared, and they're staying in the shelter, or they're clinging to that case manager. It's like the only thing they know, right? We need to say, hey, you know what? We're going to be right here. You go. You have a great life, and if it ever doesn't work out, we're going to be right here. So thank you. We're looking forward to that permanent space.
Great. That was very well said. So very well noted, and I appreciate those comments. So thank you all very much. I don't think we need a formal follow-up session unless there's an issue that arises. And needless to say, my colleagues and I stand ready to support an emergency supplemental as soon as it comes over. Thank you.
Thank you.